Okay. Okay, we'll start tonight's, what is today's date? February 6th, Planning Community Development Design Commission, in order. Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Member Tim Spiegelglass.
Mine comes
Fine.
through.
Present.
Member Laura Ragsdale.
Present.
Member Petrie Powell.
Present.
Secretary Sam Wallach, present. Vice Chairman Brian Lewis.
Present.
And Chairman Rob Dragell.
Present. Let it also be known that our city council liaison, Mayor Missy Waldman, is in attendance, as well as staff liaisons, Carlos Trejo, Olivet's Director of Planning Community Development Department, Dawn Doty, Senior Planner, and Jack Carswell is absent today. Surprising. Okay, Carlos, I'm not missing anybody online or anything, am I?
No, sir.
Okay, good, good, good. Well, thanks everybody for being in attendance. We appreciate you guys all being here. For those who have never been to one of our meetings, we follow an agenda type system. So we go through items one by one. Typically, the way we do it is there's usually a staff report where they go over the petition that's in place. There'll be some question and answers from commission members to staff. Then we typically bring on the petitioner. And then followed by public comments related to that petition item. We do have a time at the beginning related to general comments that are not associated with an agenda item. So we do ask you to, if you do have a comment, to raise your hand, let us know. If you're online, to make sure you hit the hand raise icon. And when you get asked to, come in front, for those who are in attendance, you would come up to the podium right up here. Make sure you turn the microphone on because everything's recorded and the people online won't be able to hear you if the mic's not on. And we do ask you to state your name and address for the record. For those that are online, we do ask you that you unmute yourself and turn the video on. Typically, those are both off by default, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time for us to work through getting everybody to put those on. So it'll help speed things up. All right. Carlos, did I miss anything?
No, sir. Trish, you had everything covered here.
Okay, good, good, good. Okay, so we'll move on right now to public comments. This is related to public comments that are not on the agenda item. And if you do, please come up to the podium. And I forgot to mention, we do ask that you to speak no more than 3 minutes, just to be respectful of everybody's time and make sure everybody's opinion gets heard.
Hi, Stephanie Todd, 7 Heather Hill Lane. My comment is about sump pumps. Because as you know, it's kind of too late for our street, but we still have 5 houses that aren't torn down yet. And talking to the head of our subdivision, we have a private subdivision, your requirements for sump pumps have changed. First in the backyard, then in the front, the head of our subdivision claims that your latest sump pump requirement is that they're near the street and the runoff from the sump pump goes to the street. I'm asking you, do not do that, because we have 2 houses. One house was like 5 feet from the street. It was all running in the street, and then the water sits there and pools. And then it's winter, it's icy, and it just makes a mess. We asked the owner to move it back. The owner did. He did that on his own. He moved it back like 50 feet. And so it took care of the problem. We have another house that's dumping on our street, and it's making this huge puddle. And so the reason I'm asking you to move it to the backyard instead in the front is because, hardly any streets in Olivet have gutters. And the sewer systems are far and few between. And so the roads are very uneven. They're very, they have low spots in. And so when people sump pumps, especially now when we've been getting all this rain, they push all this water out, it just sits in the street. And then in the winter, it's really dangerous because now it's icy. And then it's just a pain anyway, and it ruins the street now because you got these big puddles and it wears it away and on and on and on. So I'm asking you, wait, if whatever, because it seems like from our subdivision, the requirement has changed a lot. It keeps going back and forth and back and forth. So I'm asking you, have sump pumps, discharge like in the backyard away from the street so that the water is retained in the yard instead of flowing out in the street.
That's a good comment. I do think, just to follow up with that, sometimes it depends on the grading of the yard too, which makes it a little tricky.
Yes.
The idea is to, have it, pop up, 20 feet, I believe, from, so it runs along the ground for at least 20 feet. So it can soak in. The only problem is nowadays is that a lot of the lawns are so well kept, manicured, and stuff, it just tends to run off rather than soak in.
Well, and that's a problem with grass. It's,
Yeah.
they're not much, they have
But
like 50%
it's a good point,
runoff.
and I think what I'll ask Carlos to do, if you could just talk to our, stormwater consultant, just to see kind of what his experience is with that, as well.
Will do.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? Seeing none, Carlos, will you please check online?
And yeah, there's one person online. But I'm not sure if they.
Okay, I think, well, we'll ask Mr. Jeff, if you do have a public comment, to please raise your hand. We'll give you a couple seconds just in case. Otherwise, we'll keep moving on. Okay, so seeing none, we'll move on to to old business. And this is 820 North Press Road. Carlos?
All right, Chairman, this was deferred from our December 19th meeting, in which we had a petition initially started for a covered walkway with solar panels, and we requested, because the covered walkway is considered an accessory structure, since it included solar panels, the solar panels have to come before the commission for their approval. We don't have a mechanism within our accessory code that authorizes solar panels on accessory structures. Those have to be reviewed and approved by the commission. But in doing so, they had a covered walkway going to a point. So we requested, you can't just have a covered walkway going to nowhere. What is the rest of the where to the covered walkway, and asked the petitioners to put together what do they plan for the rest of the property in there. And they submitted plans prior to the meeting on December 19th that illustrated the covered walkway with the solar mounted or roof mounted solar arrays, along with a detached garage structure and an in-ground pool. And those were presented to you on the 9th as 3 specific items, given that is what I requested, I think, as a planner, to ask what is the master plan for this property in there. That led to some discussion regarding our accessory structure ordinance regulations, the definition, and the overall design and content of the structure. One of the detached accessory building was it was over 1,000 square feet. It had a height, 2-level height in there. The in-ground pool, if we calculated the square footages correctly, would have exceeded the maximum that would be permitted by code. So the item was deferred for the developer to have more time to kind of go through this and work through that. Plan revisions were submitted about mid-January, and then we received the latest update today. But I think the whole intent here, that there's still a need for further discussion regarding on Article 14, which is our accessory structure regulations. in there. But this process started probably like around November when we received a building permit application for the construction of a covered walkway that included roof mounted solar arrays in there. And we would like to request that the commission take action on that. You know, they have changed from the December 19th. The extent of the covered walkway is not as long as it was before in there, but pretty much the design is consistent, and the application of the walkways onto the rooftop of the covered walkway is more of a building issue, and the specifications and drawings for that have been submitted. And the only thing is that we still have the elongated walkway. We'll have to get revisions that show the shorter one that you have before you tonight. And I think Jack put an illustration here. In regards to the garage addition with living space above that you see here and this pool, we're requesting that the commission consider, at least at this time, what we call postpone action in there. We've gone over various ways of how to get this coordinated without taking, the commission is required to take some form of action solely because I brought the 3 items specifically to your attention because I think we needed to know what was going to happen on this property in there. So a postponement doesn't necessarily reflect a denial, but we would request that we be given 60 or 90 days so the commission can continue discussion regarding the regulations for accessory structures, some of the guidelines that are in place, and then hopefully the petitioner can work to adjust those to meet those more closely to our community values and principles as it relates to Chapter 425 and such. So that is a request I'm asking. In there, again, this whole process I kind of initiated, but was initially started with the intent to construct this covered walkway. And I'd like to get the petitioner going on there. Now, that covered walkway, we would have done the review administratively on our own without involving the commission because it's under the threshold that's authorized under our accessory structure ordinance in there. But because there's the roof mounted solar arrays on it, that threw it into the category that I had to bring it to the commission in there. We'll like to get them going on that in there. I know the petitioners here in there did bring to his attention yesterday that there are still issues that we have to get resolved. They're also working on some additional plans to get those submitted that weren't ready for today's meeting. These were the latest that came in yesterday.
Do you want to go over some of those issues or not now?
I'll leave that to the commission if you want to have the discussion. It really goes back to what we talked about at the previous meeting. It's okay. One is, under the accessory structure regulations, which is, I believe, Article Roman numeral 16 in our zoning code, was primarily written to provide limitations on administrative authority and approvals by staff. Because prior to, I'm going to say 2008 plus or minus 4 years, accessory structures were solely reviewed and approved by staff. And they never had to come to the commission. And we were getting concerns in that, bringing those to the commission's attention and the council. It was in the city's best interest to preserve our values, to have some type of mechanism to limit the staff approval of that. Other communities had similar restrictions on how high and how big. In our discussion, the commission was comfortable authorizing staff, I think, pretty reasonable numbers, and even on height as compared to some of our neighbors in there. But felt that it was in the city's best interest not to put a cap in the process where somebody would have to go to the Board of Zoning review for appeals for variance, because at that point it becomes what is the hardship, and an imposed hardship is not valid in there. So similar to our fence ordinance, it was something that was an aesthetic and design review process that best fit within the commission in there. as any ordinances, there is an ultimate cap, and we call that 10%, but that applies to all structures combined in total. And they're not to any specific individual structure. That at that point, the goal was to ensure that we maintain some green space within those properties, but not specifically into these individual structures, because we had a pretty good size allotment. And I believe the intent is like, yeah, so when I do get something that is over what I'm authorized to approve, you know, it's something simple to bring to the commission that this was, you know, a little bit over the number in there. This one was a little bit different. This petition was a little bit different in there. And at what point is an accessory structure, you know, no longer subordinate to the principal structure that's on the property? And that's where then we talked about the definitions of accessory structures. And the definition of accessory structures, there are three specific items. But one most important is that it must be subordinate to the principal structure, both in, I believe, height and area in there. But it doesn't tell you what is subordinate, you know, in there. And I think that's a discussion we have to have and really take a close look. The way our ordinances work is, again, we have these design guidelines to help us give some direction of what is an acceptable design if you're going to go over that comes before the commission. And then we also have the site plan review procedure where we also look at what are the external impacts to not just the site in itself or the neighboring properties, but to the neighborhood and then to the community as a whole. And it gives a lot of leeway to the commission in there. It's flexible, which is good, but sometimes flexible can be pushing you to the extreme ends. And I think that was something we were trying to tackle in this case, where you have, you know, a principal building that has a specific square footage, an accessory building that is really close in area, just as in footprint, and just as comparable in height. And if you were to look at it in some type of conceptual way or prop, but if this is a principal and this is the accessory, you know, is it really subordinate, you know, or is it pretty close? And I think that's a discussion. Again, there is no guidance for the commission. This is the hard decisions you make based on a consensus of, you know, what are the reasonable numbers in that process. The commission advisor asked that we look at other communities, and we'll have the discussion later in the agenda. And we did, and there several of them had specific hard numbers. All of them had hard numbers on height, and not even getting into the use issue. Others said, you know, they can only be used for these specific purposes. I like our ordinance. I like that flexibility. It encourages creativity. It encourages things that we generally wouldn't have thought of if we created it too rigidly. But on the other end, sometimes it can get too flexible, and I think that's something we need to talk to. What are those impacts in there? And I think we need more time to have that discussion, to give guidance to the petitioner, because again, what their intent here is that they're designing and putting something that numerically would be in conformance with code. But the issue here is whether, in terms of visually and design, is it consistent with our community values? Is it going to be consistent with the site, the neighbors, and the community as a whole in there? And I think those type of things, you know, a good designer, good engineer, a good team can really make something work in there. And I think right now we're still waiting for some additional revisions to see if they have that, or if they need more guidance, or is it, you know, they're really going to have to consider the sizes that they're looking at.
Can you briefly walk through some of the major changes with the new plan compared to the original?
Yes, not.
I picked out a few things, you know, that I could see, but just.
I'm going to go back to the plan set. I need anybody online. I'm assuming that you will be able to see the screen that I'm on now. So this is the plan set. There has been some adjustments in there in terms to the height and some of the dimensions, but really minor. We're talking about a foot But when you look at the key table, it says a specific amount plus or minus. So I'm not going to go in there, but from a design aspect, there was a change in terms of the roof line. Instead of that hip facing north to south, it's now east to west. So the properties to the south and north will now see, and I apologize if I got the incorrect, the gabled in along there. So they're not looking at the high hip end, they're looking at the low end. And then there is a note in here that the structure is, it's almost like within a little less than a foot below the principal structure, but I don't have the principal structure outside of a numeric number that says, I think 29 feet plus or minus, and then I have a height of 28 feet plus or minus for the garage. So it's really hard to say. And again, our submission requirements are pretty thorough that will give us a good guidance to see this in a cross section.
Yeah.
And they're both east to west and north to south because of how it impacts the adjacent owners in there. But more importantly, on our end, that east to west will give me that comparison of the street, the foundation of the principal structure and its height, the foundation of the accessory structure and its height, and then we can see it how it works because it is a pretty deep lot.
Mhm.
However, it is also a very narrow lot. So the north to south cross section will give us a little bit more detail.
So we haven't seen any cross sections. or
Not as of
any-
yet. No,
we
those
don't
are
know
the
where
things that are.
windows are, or things like, okay.
But it-
Go ahead.
And I guess, Carlos, I'm reading through this. I mean, tonight we're only looking to take any action on the covered walkway.
Correct.
Because I mean, at this point, I appreciate the revisions, but I guess two things I want to call out is even if we approve the covered walkway, we're not guaranteeing that we would and could or will approve the garage or anything else. So I just want to write. And the expectations, they have to come back and meet all the requirements, and then we're going to vote and look at it at that point.
Correct.
I just want to make sure that, yeah, so my thought is, I mean, it could change 5 times over before
Yeah.
then. So I wonder if we just focus on the walkway and then,
I think you're right. I
Yeah.
just kind of wanted to get
Yeah.
an understanding or idea.
And,
Just,
and again, I'll stress because of how I presented that on December 19th to identify all 3 structures. To make sure that we're covered because the code requires that the commission has to take action within 60 days of the application submittal. This will be our last meeting before we hit that 60th day. So therefore, again, I'm asking the commission to take one motion on one item and then to take the motion of postponing. We'd ask the applicant at least 60 or 90 days on that. If they decide to know that that's too long, or the commission wants to talk about how long that should be, that's okay in there. But if there's no consensus, then the commission, it would be in the city's best interest, the commission just deny that and they resubmit when they're ready.
I just had one question, and just to refresh my recollection. This area is zoned single-family residential, correct?
That is correct.
And so when they add a living space above the garage, are there limitations in the interior that would change it to, now you have 2 homes on the same site? So I'm just wondering how that works exactly.
It's a good question. What the code says is that it should be only one family that lives on the property.
Okay,
The code does not say how that family should live or function on that property.
okay.
So whether there's multiple sinks, multiple kitchens, multiple baths, that is not regulated by the zoning code or through what the process we are here.
So when somebody comes in for their occupancy permit, you'll know how many beds and how many heads?
A good question again. So yes, through the permitting, whether it's through the permitting or if the property was up for sale,
Mhm.
there is an occupancy inspection that identifies the number of bedrooms and also what the capacity is in there. And then there is a definition of what is a single family. We've transitioned from the 1960s of what represents family. And a family is that you have
You think?
uh,
We're going back though,
you
right?
have no more than 3 unrelated individuals that are not, that are not related by blood, marriage, or so. So you could have a group of 3 adults living in there without any, in compliance with what we term as a family. In there, or you can have the capacity that's all under one family in there, but it doesn't reference how the interior of the structure is used. I think the question that you're asking is, there are other communities that require occupancy certificates in which you actually fill out paperwork to identify who is in your family and who, and again, you could have all 3 unrelated people, or you can have in my case, it would have been a family of 12 and everybody's name listed in there. And as long as it doesn't exceed the capacity, that is okay. The city of Olivet does not require an occupancy certificate in there. So it is just based on the rule is you can't have more than 3 unrelated individuals in there. And the code says, and I know that you can have some questions on this because we're still working on putting this together, but you could have an unrelated individual live, in your basement and exit from independently, or on, in a garage, that might have been converted. In there, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a violation, but if it's rented or leased, it is a violation, and it's just whether that violation is caught in that process, and then we would respond to it. So it's one of those things that, again, it's written and the rules are identified, but how they're enforced becomes tricky.
Okay, anybody else have any questions or comments for Carlos?
So I saw a gutter on here. So where is that gutter going into a detention area?
Right, that's one of the things that would have to be resolved, and that's why we don't feel that it's pertinent to take action on the garage or the pool, because we do need a stormwater plan, given the size of items that they're in there. Now, for the walkway, it is, I believe it's under 150 square feet, or pretty close to that, plus or minus, in there. It is not required to be drained into a specific system. Now, if they pursue to add other accessory structures like they've already have submitted, then yes, that would have to be interconnected into the master stormwater system.
So
And I
that
think-
would actually, even though we did it now, we approved it now, they could retroactively say, hey, you need to put that in there.
Correct. And I think Mr. Carswell, in his recommendations on your staff report, identifies that if an addition, if they're to continue to pursue the other accessory structures within that time frame, that walkway needs to be incorporated into the storm system. Good question.
And my other question was, I know last time there was concern about there is other work going on and permitting. Has that permit been closed out?
I think the inspections were scheduled. I don't believe that they've been closed out yet.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Carlos, at the beginning, you said that accessory structures like the walkway has to go to somewhere. So it's not going to somewhere though,
Correct.
at this time.
But
And
we,
if we are not taking action on the other things and we're deferring them or postponing those other items, if we would approve the walkway and then we don't approve the pool and garage, would the walkway then need to come down?
no.
Goes to a driveway.
No.
Okay.
Now, if there was something significant of the walkway, because right now I know that there is an existing driveway along that goes parallel with the walkway. I also know that there's a slab, an old slab that probably may not be usable based on what we've heard from the architect in there. So, I kind of initially looked at this as like, can I get this master concept plan of what you plan to do, and that they were going to be built in phases. But I think, around December, the process changed, that this was all being requested now to do all at once. And we just didn't have the sufficient information, and we still had questions about some of these sizes in there. I don't look at that covered walkway. It's no different than having a pergola, or something. It's a personal design choice that they want to pursue. The code would permit it. And again, it may have, if the solar arrays were not on the roof, we would have just gone through the permitting process.
Anyone else? No, I guess, but let's hear from the petitioner. Remember to state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Zon. Yep. My name is Ilya Edelman. I'm at 820 North Price Road here in Olivet. Thank you guys for your time in considering this. I just want to talk briefly about the additional changes that were made based on the previous discussion. I understand that we're not necessarily addressing those or making a decision on those tonight, but I think it's important for you guys to kind of know where we're at in our process. So the two main points of feedback from last discussion were the height of the structure and that it exceeded the height of the primary residence, even though the grades are such that it would be below and would not be visible from the street. And then the other concern, as Carlos mentioned, was the total area covered by accessory structures, which was above the 10% that's allowed. Both of those things have been addressed. So the height of the garage is now at 24 feet and 11 inches, which is below the height of the house. And again, because of grade, it's significantly below at this point. You will not be able to see it from the street. And we did reduce, among other things, so we reduced the length of the covered walkway. We also reduced the size of the pool deck and kind of brought everything a little bit closer together to get us below that 10% requirement. So those things have also been addressed. We did listen to some feedback from our neighbors as well, as far as like, the two-story structure. And we are thinking about altering the orientation of the structure to help ease some of those concerns. We don't have that finalized as of right now, but it is something we're considering. So our intent here is to be in compliance with all of the issues. I do want to address the stormwater. So we are going to have a fully, actually it was ready today. It was just too late to submit it in time for this hearing, but we do have fully engineered plans ready with a water management feature. I haven't personally seen them yet. So it's either a BMP or some sort of underground cistern. Whatever it is engineered and calculated to address the water runoff. And there is a gutter on that covered walkway that drains into that system. Yep.
Do the drawings that you have show a different orientation?
No, they do not. This is a discussion that was had today with the neighbors. So
Oh, okay.
we don't have that updated yet.
Okay.
And we're not sure if it will be feasible just because of the width of the lot.
Right.
So it's something that Tom, the architect, is exploring,
Okay.
but it's not something I have ready to present right now.
When was that meeting? Was that before this meeting or?
It was this morning.
This morning?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm glad you guys had that meeting.
Yep.
So, any other questions or comments to the petitioner? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point in time, if there's anybody in the public or in the audience or online that wishes to have a public comment, please remember to state your name and address and no more than 3 minutes if you don't mind.
Got it. Hi, everyone. Tim Hellman at 800 North Price, just south of the proposed project. I'm here because I'm really concerned about the impact of the project on our property. We have no issue with the walkway, no issue with the pool or the single-story garage. It's the proposed two-story structure. It's a 1,928 square feet, as you know, and it's an apartment. We're concerned that this will have significant negative impacts on our property and the surrounding area. All of its code, chapter 400, defines accessory structures as structures that are, quote, subordinate in area, extent, or purpose to the principal building. However, the structure is larger than the main house by almost 500 square feet. The house is 1,500 square feet and 1.5 stories. The proposed garage and apartment is 1,928 and a full 2 stories. A structure exceeding the primary residence in size directly contradicts the definition of an accessory structure and does not comply with city codes. Simplistically, the apartment is bigger than the house. When you guys are looking at this in the next few weeks after discussion on the walkway, I think that one of the biggest questions you have in front of you is, what is the subordinate? And this structure does not seem subordinate to the house. It doesn't seem that it follows community values. As Ilya said, we're also concerned about the impact of stormwater runoff. We get a lot of runoff from 820 already, and most of the neighboring downspouts from that property are on our side of the property, and the yard just gets, our yard gets sopping wet right now. That's a good point of that. We've already installed 2 separate rain gardens to manage all the excess water. And a building of this scale will create even more impermeable surfaces, worsening the rainwater problems. Finally, regarding ADUs, while the city's comprehensive plan mentions ADUs as an option for aging in place and quote unquote missing middle housing, the commission has yet to develop specific guidelines on the appropriateness or scale, such as the question of being subordinate. Approving this project prematurely could set a precedent that's difficult to reverse. I'm afraid we're opening a door. Furthermore, the homeowner states that this space is for an aging parent, but once built, it could serve any purpose, raising concerns about future use and the subsequent enforcement. I ask the commission to consider all of our concerns and not approve this petition until significant changes are made to lessen the size of the garage and reduce the impact on our property and surrounding properties. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. Anyone else? Kate?
Hello, I'm Kate Hellman and I live at 800 North Price Road. So in addition to the concerns stated by my husband, our biggest concern really is about the visual and physical impact of this structure for our property. Because of its at least current size, orientation, and location, the garage and apartment creates a significant visual burden for our property. Page 12 of the design guidelines states that improvements should, quote, not dominate or overshadow your neighbors, end quote. But we feel like this structure does exactly that. The longest side of the building is 41 feet and directly faces our property. It may be 38 feet now on these updated drawings, meaning that the maximum visual impact is what is actually facing our property currently. The proposed garage also sits less than 6 feet away from our property line, but the original garage and the house are both at 10-foot setbacks. So the argument that it won't be visible from the street really doesn't hold up unless the 10-foot setback that exists for the house and the former garage is used instead of the proposed 6-foot setback. So the impact of just such a large structure, we think, will be seen and felt from all aspects of our yard. And I did have a designer draw up some renderings for what it would look like. Now, granted, these were created before the roof changed, before some other things changed, but I'd be happy to share these with the commission to get kind of a 3D sense of what it looks like. So to reduce the impact, we would ask that the garage stay on the original footprint with a 10-foot setback to reduce the just visual proximity and allow space for landscaping. We also would really like to see the garage limited to 1 story. And if any living quarters are desired, that they be integrated into the first floor, into the ground floor. And potentially reorienting the structure, as Elia mentioned, so that its longest side faces the primary residence rather than our property. And then potentially also just looking at designing the garage to better match the house, which is a 1.5-story house, as opposed to being a 2-story structure. So we urge the commission to deny the proposal in its current form, and hope that a new petition can come forward that is better, fits better with our desires for our property and the surrounding properties as well.
Yeah, if you please hand that up, that'd be great. And I take it you were in attendance this morning?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Well, not this morning, and definitely appreciate the conversation and the willingness to have that conversation.
Good. Thank you.
I just have a question, and with all due respect, I'm not sure that it's appropriate that we look at drawings based upon old plans that are not even being proposed and not an issue at this point. I just don't think that's fair to the applicant to be
No, sure.
looking at that. And, you know,
It's
making up
fair.
our minds based on something that they're not even proposing.
But it is something that we discussed. It was
Yeah,
brought to us and it does give a kind of a visual
But it
indication.
does it, they've changed their plans. This is based upon the plans that were presented
But there were
last.
comments that were made
Yeah.
that, and I think that's what they're trying to show. So-
Just my opinion. I don't think it's
Well,
appropriate.
if anybody would like to see these, I have them up here, and that way, if you don't, then we don't. Yeah, so. Carlos, I'll give you a copy of these or give you these as well.
Sorry, may I clarify a couple things?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I don't want to get this into a rebuttal back and.
no,
forth,
no, just, this
So
is
let's just try to.
just facts here. So, it was mentioned that the apartment is 1,900 square feet. It's only 900, I believe it's 950. I could be a few feet off there in living areas. So I believe Tim included the garage and
Yeah.
right. And I just want to make that clear that the apartment itself is about 50 to 60% of the living space of the house. The 1,500 square feet in the house, that is all living space. There's also a basement. So if you include that, the house is actually quite a bit bigger
Yeah.
in terms of just square footage. So I just want to make that clear. As far as the footprint, we are just extending that footprint one garage bay deeper into the back of the property. So we're not increasing the footprint north-south. We're increasing it towards the east.
Right.
So just want to make that clear. I do share Member Powell's opinion that, I haven't seen those illustrations. I don't know if they accurately represent what we're trying to do. I don't know if the materials are represented properly. So
Call
Yeah.
Carlos. We'll make sure we get a copy, to everybody.
sure, I just don't know if it's appropriate to consider
No,
this
but what's
application
important.
based on those renderings.
Oh, I don't think anybody's making a decision,
Okay.
but it's different. But it's, if there's something that needs to be clarified, it might help them as well to better understand the project.
Sure.
Visual indications are always good. I mean, but we do need to clarify it to make sure it's being what's accurate
Mhm.
and what's being discussed.
And
So-
it's, each member of the commission can decide for themselves how much weight they give to any information that's presented here. So it's open to the public. People are free to say whatever they want. We can decide amongst ourselves how much weight we give to any of that information.
Sure.
Well said.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else in the audience have any public comments related to this agenda item? Seeing none in the audience, Carlos, you please check online.
Mr. Eckholtz, did you want to speak in regards to this petition? Show a raise of hands. It doesn't look like, sir.
Okay, seeing none. Any further discussion amongst commission members?
As it relates to the second proposed motion, I know nobody's made a motion yet, but if we're going to, I think my personal preference would not to postpone indefinitely, but to set at least some outside date to keep things moving, even if it's 120 days or something like that. So I think Carlos recommended
Is-
60 to 90, but
Is there any advantage to postponing to whether it's 90, 60, 90, 120, or just denying so they can start over? Or is it easier or harder? I'm not sure what the advantage is.
No, the original petition, both for the building permit and the application for the commission, was for the solar panel arrays. And it was my decision asking the question, what is the grand plan, that the additional items were placed under that application. So it wouldn't be like they paid additional fees to
Yeah,
add
that's-
those items on. No, they would have to come back and resubmit when they're prepared for.
That was my concern. I didn't want them to pay a second fee.
Right.
If it's gonna make it harder for the petitioner, then I would say otherwise I'm more inclined to decline in that because whether it takes him 2 days or 120, I don't want us to be time boxed or him to be time boxed, if that makes sense. As long as it's not gonna be more financially impacting or harder work for him to do that.
No.
Jim,
I thought.
I'm just gonna ask the petitioner if he has a preference.
Yeah, I would prefer a shorter time period. Like I said, plans are ready. Honestly, we ready to.
Yeah, sorry about that. Good point. Good point.
Sorry about that. Thank you. As I was saying, the plans are ready to go. They'll be in final form in the next few days. So we should be able to resubmit in time for the next meeting of this commission.
What about if you
And
plan to?
wait, but just to clarify that, Chairman, because I understand and I respect the schedule you're looking at, but we won't, staff wise. It takes about 30 days for a consultant to do his engineering review for the stormwater.
Mhm.
We don't have that yet. And I'm not going to send it Friday, tomorrow if I receive them. So they won't go out till Monday. So it won't be until probably sometime mid-March. And there, we also want to make sure that the public has access to those plans at least 2 weeks prior to a meeting on our website. So
Mhm.
that will go to, correct, I understand 90 being long, but I think 60 days is a reasonable request. Again, I'll let you and the commission, if there's in there, I believe, I feel it's better than just saying doing the denial and having the resubmission in there, but we do need a consensus and that you're okay with that time.
Mhm. Yeah, I think 60 days is reasonable. I agree. We can certainly get plans in with plenty of lead time to accommodate all the requirements that Carlos mentioned.
If we frame this as not more than 90 days, if it's ready ahead of time, can it get on the schedule ahead of time instead of?
Yes, if I get everything, for tomorrow, get that stuff set forward if Monday and they expedite the review or stuff, they do have, I'm still waiting for 3 more right now. When I get that, and then at least that I have 2 weeks that the public can see those. So I would probably be looking, either the second meeting in March or the first meeting in April.
Okay.
We'll have to talk tonight about the second meeting in March because it does fall during spring break. And I need to get a kind of a head count so we can give an advance notice to applicants.
Okay.
So, so I'm sorry, so what happens if he comes back and it's right at that 60-day marker, 90-day marker? And then we have to make a decision that night if it's a go or not, and then it's a denial, we can't
We're,
extend it at all, right?
yeah, then it'd be a denial and then it'd be a resubmit. Okay, very good. All right, thank you.
Now, Chairman, I would add, if it's okay here, because again, while I agree and appreciate that we will get these more refined plans in place, and we'll talk about this later, but the true question is, again, going back to accessory and being subordinate to, and having that discussion, and whether as long as it does not exceed, or it should be a specific percentage of what the primary structure is in there. I think the petitioner has to have, has to consider that in and incorporate that into design and make decisions in there. And there isn't much guidance I can provide them right now based on some of the discussions we've had regarding this petition. Maybe later on, after we talk about this tonight, see what the other communities are doing, then I can get some idea to go back to the petitioner saying, wait, okay, do these shifts or changes, or this is, you need to find some reductions in there. And I want to give them that opportunity so they can make that choice.
Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to talk about that later?
I would
thought we
prefer,
might-
as we got one more item that should be hopefully, depends on the commission, that we need to go through and then.
Yeah.
and
But,
talk
okay, so not now, but at the end of the meeting.
Yes.
Good, good. Yeah, I agree. Okay. That being said, do I hear a motion? Sam?
Mr. Chairman, I'd love to make a motion. Motion to approve the petition for site plan community design review for the placement of roof mounted solar panels on the proposed covered walkway located at 820 North Price Road, as presented in the memorandum from the Department of Planning and Community Development dated February 6, 2025, subject to any staff conditions noted therein.
Motion's been made by Sam Wallach. Do I hear a second?
Second.
And seconded by Tim Spiegelglass. Carlos, you please call the vote.
Commissioner Spiegelglass, Commissioner Ragsdale,
Approved.
Commissioner Powell,
Approved.
Commissioner Wallach,
Approved.
Commissioner Lewis,
Approved.
Commissioner Jurgell.
Approved.
So the motion on the placement of the solar array panels on the covered walkway passes unanimously. The next step in that process would be, of course, applying for the building permit. Now, the building permit application has been received, but the plans have been revised. So I need the revised set of plans to come in so they could conduct a review.
Okay, so do I hear a second motion? sir?
Yes. I'd like to make a motion to propose for a period of not more than 90 days, a petition for a site plan, community design, and concept stormwater review for the additional proposed improvements, detached garage, pool, and pool deck located at 820 North Price Road, as presented in the memorandum from the Department of Planning and Community Development dated February 6, 2025, subject to any staff conditions noted therein.
Motion's been made by Sam Wallach. Do I hear a second?
Second.
And seconded by Brian Lewis. Carlos, you please call the vote.
Commissioner Spiegelglass, Commissioner Ragsdale,
Approved.
Commissioner Powell,
Approved.
Commissioner Wallach,
Approved.
Commissioner Lewis,
Approved.
and Commissioner Jurgell.
Approved.
That motion passes unanimously 60-0, and of course that authorizes up to 90 days. And then we'll work with the petitioner as soon as we get that plan set and get that out for review.
Good, good, good. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Okay, we'll now move on. I'll give you some time, Carlos. Oh, you're already there.
I'm set.
Faster than me. Okay, we'll move on to new business. Item A, an ordinance to amend ordinance 2565. Carlos.
Chairman, we discussed this briefly at our last meeting earlier, towards the end of January regarding auto beauty specialists looking to lease some storage warehouse space across their facility at 1223 North Price. That's where they're currently located. Across the street, there is a multi-tenant industrial building, addresses 1220 North Price. They have 28,000 square feet on a lower level for storage warehouse. Normally, storage warehouse is a permitted use in the LI district. However, Auto Beauty Specialist operates as under a special permit. And for them to expand their operations across the street, it would be best for them to amend their special permit to incorporate the site to reflect that site and their use of that site on the grounds. And I apologize for the typo there that it says 1224. I got it correct on the report.
That's right.
I'll get on Jack tomorrow for this.
Yeah.
But so you have it in place. So we talked about it a little bit at our last meeting, and there was some concerns that were expressed about having some type of termination plan. What happens, what will happen to those vehicles? And we have placed a condition as part of that potential motion for the commission to consider. And that would require that they notify the city 30 days in advance, that they submit a plan for the relocation and storage of vehicles that will be coming back to their original site. And then that if the commission authorizes this ordinance amendment, this amendment would be rescinded. Meaning that will go back to regular storage warehouse use. And if somebody wanted to use it for vehicle types, they'd have to come back in and apply.
Makes sense.
And I hope that kind of addresses, there was quite a bit of discussion. Wanted to make sure I got the concern handled, or if that handles the thoughts of that process. As of date, and they've been there since 2015, we had not had any formal or noted issues regarding the contents or conduct on the site. And then from our end on the staff wise, they've always worked cooperatively with us in there.
Sam, I think you had kind of some of the concerns. So based on the way it reads now and the way it's set up.
Yeah.
Feel good.
I am satisfied with the conditions.
You're good. Good. Okay, any further discussions?
I do have representatives, both the manager for the industrial, the multi-tenant building at 1220 North Price, and of course, Mr. Vola, who is a comptroller with Auto Beauty Specialist, if there's any questions.
Good, good. Well, I was gonna just wait to see if anybody from the
Absolutely.
commission had any questions for you. Seeing none. Would the petitioners like to speak? Feel pretty good? Feel pretty good? All right, all right. Okay, thank you. Okay. There's no, any further discussion? Do I hear a motion? Oh, public comments. Great point. Thank you, Tim. All right. Is there any public comments related to this agenda item in the audience? Seeing none, nobody wants to look directly at me. Carlos, will you please check online?
Mr. Eccles, again, if there was any comments regarding to this agenda item regarding our auto beauty specialists and their special permit. And being none, sir.
Okay. Okay, so we're right back to where we were. So do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
Motion to approve a petition for an ordinance to amend ordinance 2565. An ordinance to authorize the issuance of a special permit to auto beauty specialist to operate an automobile collision repair facility at the property addressed as 1223 North Price Road to include 28,000 square feet of lower level warehouse space for indoor vehicle storage at 1220 North Price Road, as presented in the memorandum from the Department of Planning and Community Development dated January 16th. Should we?
February 6th. Sorry.
All right, February 6th, 2025, subject to any staff conditions noted therein.
Motion's been made by Brian Lewis. Do I hear a second?
Second.
And seconded by Laura Ragsdale. Carlos, you please call the vote.
Commissioner Spiegelglass,
Approved.
Commissioner Ragsdale,
Approved.
Commissioner Powell,
Approve.
Commissioner Wallach,
Approved.
Commissioner Lewis,
Approved.
and Commissioner Dragell.
Approved.
The motion passes unanimously 6-0. So the next step in a special permit that has been recommended by the Plan Commission is that it now goes to the city council through a formal ordinance. That being said, it will be scheduled at the council meeting for first reading on February 25th. And then a public hearing on March 11th.
All right. Thank you guys for being in attendance, being here for in case we did have questions. So thank you. All right. Okay, so Carlos, we'll move on to new business item B. An ordinance to amend Article 8 permitted signs in industrial LID zoning district of Chapter 415 regulations.
And Chairman, if it's okay, and sorry, I should have gave you a heads up. If it's okay, if we can discuss the next items are really more issues regarding the city requested codes.
Yeah,
I know there are some residents here that want to talk on a topic, but if we can just jump into the accessory structure discussion.
Sure.
Sure. In there, because there is nobody waiting for the next couple of items.
Yeah. No, that's no problem at all.
I appreciate that, sir.
So we'll move into that. Oh, there's a hand raised in the audience.
I'm curious, would that signage by the signage ordinance, Carlos, affect?
Would you
Yeah.
mind coming up here?
Not at all.
Remember to state your name and address for the record.
My name is Drew Clary. I'm the representative for 1220 North Price Road. I was just curious, and I keep this super brief. Would this signage code suggestion or suggestion to update your signage code in this district have any impact on this building?
Yes.
I'm assuming positively.
Yes.
Okay.
I just don't know
Yeah.
the specific frontage.
Yeah.
But I do believe you have more than 200 feet
You do.
of frontage. I
Okay.
do believe that 1223 has more than 200 feet of frontage along
Cool.
Price. And so, yes, that would permit you to have a secondary type of
Great.
monument sign.
Cool. Well, I can catch up with you offline
Yes.
about it. Thank
Right.
you. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, Carlos.
All right. So we talked about this a little bit at our January meeting about accessory structures and what the definition is. And it's noted on here that, an accessory structure is when all of the following criteria are complied with. It's subordinate to and serves the principal building or principal use, is subordinate in area, extent, or purpose to the principal building or principal use. It contributes to the comfort, convenience, and necessity of occupants, businesses, industry, and is located on the same lot. I looked at other communities, and they it's pretty much a universal definition. I haven't found one where it did not have those four, and it did not specifically say that it has to meet all of those. We looked at Creve Coeur, Ladue, and University City. Now, we didn't go extensively in there because there's always, just like in our ordinance, if you really dig into the details, you'll find that there are other opportunities or things that you can do in there. Creve Coeur was pretty specific, though. You're limited to 12 to 15 feet in height. After that, you would have to go through a variance process, and again, through the true definition of a variance, it'd be hard to show that that it didn't it wasn't self-imposed. In terms of the accessory storage, it can't exceed the ground floor area of the principal building on the lot. And what it was saying is that the total combined accessory structure, so any pool, any shed, any detached building, any pergola, if you combine all of those together, they can't be bigger than the footprint of the existing house. It's not that an individual structure can't be bigger than, it's the combination of all those can't exceed the footprint of the existing house. So they were pretty stringent in their requirements.
That's square foot of the actual base, and I guess I'm asking that in the sense of, like the other one that came before us, 900 first floor, 900 second floor, but that would only count as 900 because we're talking about like
It's the ground floor area.
ground floor area.
Yes.
only. Okay.
Carlos,
Now, go ahead.
I'm sorry. When you saying here all have the same definition for the other municipalities, does that mean it has the same definition as Olivet? And then
Correct. They all seem to use it in terms of that, the accessory structure use and using the term all, and then those four components. They're pretty much universal.
Okay, but the other municipalities have defined height
Height.
restrictions, which
Correct.
Olivet does not.
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, all of that does, again,
Yeah.
because we converted ours to provide authority to the administrative staff to expedite some of these permits up to a certain point. And that point was kind of a comfort point, I guess.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
The Creve Coeur one, let me just, Brian asked, the total accessory structure can't exceed the ground floor area of the building. But it could have if they had multiple stories,
It's just a footprint.
just the footprint of the building.
Does their garage include in that footprint?
It's part of the ground floor area, I would think that, and again, it's getting into the details.
Right.
Hard to tell, but I would assume it would. It wouldn't be just what is habitable, what isn't habitable. Now, the interesting thing about that ordinance is not equitable in there. So because I have a bigger house, same lot, equal size lots, but I added an addition to my house, I can have more accessory structures than my neighbor that never added to their house. Or again, I could be restricted to what I'm doing because this is what I have in my house now. But once I do the addition, all of a sudden I've opened up the code and I can add more in there.
Cannot happen? Is that what you're saying?
The Creve Coeur ordinance is not very equitable when applied to the
That you
individual
can do
lots.
that at Creve.
Now, they do have, they have 4 zoning districts, with the first 2 zoning districts more consistent with our size of lots. But they do have a lot of land area where the lots are greater than 20,000 square feet. They have 2 other zoning districts for larger type of lots. So it's hard to put, they're not apples to apples. We're not.
And we still have could be confusing issues. We still have is it 10%?
Yes, we still have, that then is applied to the lot itself.
Okay, because that's part of it. That's a factor too in this, because
Correct.
you could argue the way Creve Coeur is written, that might hurt them because the 10% then becomes less unused space versus, but
In University City, they have a maximum height limit of 15 feet. And then they also state that there's no living quarters that are permitted. But then if you go again into the details, there is some discussions about having secondary units in there. Yes, but what I couldn't get is I think their intent was Like, let's say if I had a garage, I can convert a portion of that garage on the ground level into an accessory unit. But it wasn't that within the 15 feet that I can tuck in a garage within the rafters. I think it's looking at, you get a one-story structure and you can add something to that. Make sense? Ladue is interesting, and again, this is more apples to oranges, but the access to the code information was easy. The maximum height is 20 feet. Now they have a variation because of different lot sizes in there, and not to exceed 800 square feet, but then they have a similar process that you can go to the architectural review board if your lot meets certain criteria. Meaning, if you have a bigger lot, you could probably petition for a larger.
By chance, have you looked at, like Brentwood, Richmond?
I didn't
Heights?
look at those because I think I felt that that they're a little bit more urban. We can pull that information in there. We looked at Frontenac, but it was a little harder to try to read
Yeah.
that ordinance in there. And I think anything further north is probably not comparable in there, but we can take a look at those two and get you a table similar to what we did for the trees.
Because as we start gaining more density, it's, then we start potentially
Yes.
becoming more like that. So it would be kind of curious to see what they.
I don't have the plan, the general plan in front of me, but I seem to recall that we were also wanting to further affordable housing for parents, granny flats, whatever, that's also an important thing to the city. And so none of this would change what we talked about earlier, which is as long as it's a family, it can have living quarters as an apartment, as long as the people that are living there are part of the family.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And I think some of that was initiated on terms of how I use the terms that I used in presenting it, because I do see that this is an accessory dwelling unit. I think the 2024 comprehensive plan update envisioned accessory dwelling units as a potential rental type of flat where you could have a secondary family unrelated living on the site. And a lot of communities are looking at that as a means to resolve and address housing prices. You don't believe that this is the intent of the petitioner, and it was never intended to present it in that form. So I think when we look at the comp plan, it talks about, I'm going to call them ADUs, accessory dwelling units, but in the forms of creating secondary housing quarters within a lot, whether it's a duplex or whether it's an apartment that is leased out and such. And I think that's some discussion that we will have down the road in there. I think the intent here is that this is more of a mother-in-law unit, granny flat, something that's related in their space that is used within the common family.
To go a little bit farther on that, is there a way that somebody could come to us the way it is right now and actually have multiple apartments up there?
It would be, no, there is nothing within the code that would allow that. So they would have the options of trying to look at the rezoning, but that gets very complicated because residential lots are usually pretty small in there. The city creating a new zoning ordinance that authorizes that, whether it's by right or by some type of special permit, or
Well, what makes
What would
it
stop
right
it?
now, what
Yeah.
stops it from?
Yeah.
Sorry to use yours as an example, but you're right in front of us, is changing that to a 4-person, getting rid of the garage and putting 4 apartments in there.
there really isn't anything in place. So let's say if the owner of the property had 4 children and they each wanted their own little flat, as long as all 4 are related or meet that family definition, that couldn't be done. That could be done within the house in itself
I think
too.
it's the family definition is the only thing, but I think okay, let's say you turned it into, got rid of the garage, but it had 2 apartments. You have the family in the house, you have 2 people who aren't related to you that you live in 2 different ones. that would be,
Yeah, you start playing within the confines of that code, that kind of like what we're struggling here, what is subordinate? You know,
Yeah.
you're really stretching.
What's
the-
more than the three? I mean, let's say they had two people in each apartment. That'd be a total of four that weren't related.
And there are some things that you think, and they get more difficult in terms, like in a scenario like what you, Commissioner Spiegelglass had indicated, you know, the way I always look at it, but it is difficult to control, is you get, you know, one sanitary lateral, you get one water line, and you get one electrical connection. And then you can go off on those in there. But if all of a sudden you have two electrical meters, to me, that is a concern, even if it's grandma that's living there, in there, that starts to get into, crosses a line that it's difficult for us to control how that is being occupied, in there. So as long as they're living off of that same meter, I know that they're, even if that person is paying them by cash separately or whatever, I know that that one meter represents that one lot. When they start getting into multiple meters, regardless of the utility type, it becomes a concern. And, you know, that's the only red flag that visually that I could see in there without being told, hey, those people aren't related or word of mouth.
Are you allowed to put 2 meters on one lot?
There's nothing in our code that prevents it. I
thought
don't know whether
Amber
the
knew
utility,
to, like, one address. meter. That's what I was hoping.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what I would assume. But again, I don't, the city doesn't have jurisdiction over how Ameren distributes those.
So one of the questions that I had about this is, when you're doing the occupancy, somebody goes out and checks the building for just health and safety, but there's no forms that are filled out. Why wouldn't the city go ahead and just put in the code that you have to tell us who's living there and the names and the familiar, you
It's
know?
it's a good question, and it's something that we've kind of struggled. We used to require that. But there is a different thought based on the region's past, that it has been used in malicious ways.
Hmm.
And we made a decision, you know, through the council, to not require, you know, residents to come in and register themselves as living.
So now they just come in and it's just an over-the-counter permit.
Now we're only involved in terms of inspecting the structure and determining the capacity of the structure, and that's it. And I, you know, in reality,
Well, I mean, I was
we don't-
hoping somebody's at least name is
we
on
don't
it.
meet the new owner.
Yeah,
to clarify though, we're really, today though, we're talking about accessory structures, which could be dwelling units, or could be a garage, or could be a shed, or could be anything,
Pool,
right?
yeah.
Pool. The concept of what the family definition or what we should allow, to me, is a whole separate
Agree.
conversation. I just want to separate.
Good point.
This is a focus on just how much of a structure would we allow? What's in that structure? How is that structure used? Sounds like, I just want to clarify, it's a separate zoning thing.
And I
Otherwise,
think,
we can go down a big rabbit hole.
correct, and I think that's where, you know, you go back to how the ordinance was written, was not in terms of controlling use. And a little off on that aspect of it, but bear with me in there, but it's about mass volume character. That's where it throws it back to chapter 425, and then looking at this as a site plan and the impacts of the surrounding. So it really becomes, there is no right or wrong. It becomes what is comfortable between each individual commission member, and whether there's a consensus enough to authorize the size.
Want to add something though. Thought we also it was also about the impact to the neighbors and the community.
Mhm.
And depending on its use, that could have an impact.
Correct, but I think you can still create, then if if we received a structure that was an 850 square foot detached building, that had a garage component to it, but had 200 square feet of finished space with a sink, kitchen, loft in there, it's still the same. You know, we would still be dealing with the same issue. Does that make sense? I mean, I understand what you're saying, but we currently, if it was within all the parameters, or even if it was below, like below the threshold, I can issue a permit even knowing that they're gonna have a little studio apartment in their garage without any need to bring it to the commission's attention. As long as it was below 15 feet within the square footage that's been authorized in there. So therefore, yes, it plays into the role. I think that's another broader discussion to have, but it doesn't necessarily direct what we're trying to look at. I know it says accessory structure or use, but really accessory structure and subordinate, in there. What is reasonable in terms of the size?
Can we separate the two? You have a code for ADU and then a code for anything else that's in accessory
Yeah, no,
structure?
definitely, yes, they can. They can, and within Article 14, there is a section that if we wanted to, there's a section on structures and there's a section on uses. And right now, it doesn't set any restrictions on somebody putting habitable space in an accessory structure. It could be something we can do down the road.
Brian, I think that's what you're really going after, is kind of separating the two issues.
Well, I think I like that idea because it helps, because I think we're less, not to say it couldn't come up, I think we're less concerned with the pool or the garage, because that was covered by both the lot size as well as this. We could refine this if we don't think it's right, because we've had someone come in for a 2-story garage because I think he wanted to have a lift. Okay, so do we have a height restriction? I think they came in for an exception, as an example. But I think to your point, it's a much larger discussion on, we just have a topic on ADUs that are, specifically meant for living in that regard. So, now, what is the answer to that? I don't know, but but I do think separating them is probably good, because otherwise, to me, this is just, we're approving it, and then how it gets used is a separate thing. And to Carlos's point, somebody could easily bring something forward, we would never see it, and it sounds like the community we're hearing likely probably wants some comments on that, or some guidance.
And we're talking about the Airbnb and
Mhm.
the short-term rental too as well, which is gonna play into this next discussion. That should be part of that discussion, how we
Yeah.
decide that.
Is it worth hearing public comments just to kind of get some thoughts on?
Oh, I think we definitely want to get public comments on this. I just wasn't sure if we're done with our discussion right now.
Where in the code do we address the ADUs? Exactly, because I looked at the residential guidelines and there's nothing in them.
There is no reference. Because again, I think that term ADU is from the American Planning Association, means something that is independent, can be leased, or doesn't have to be related to the family. We've usually used the term mother-in-law units, granny flats, and in those terms, but then again, those are not in the code either.
As in looking at this definition, it's an interesting one. At least I'll speak for myself. I think it's an interesting one. Particularly number 2, it says it's subordinate in area, extent, or purpose to the principal building or principal use served, which to me indicates it's not dispositive if it's bigger than the primary structure. If you could say, well, it's subordinate in extent or purpose, and purpose is really broad. So to me, looking at this, I mean, it gives a lot of leeway to this commission to decide, is it subordinate in any 3 of those areas? My strong suspicion is that the vast majority of the time, area is going to be the biggest factor, probably, or, will be strongly considered, but it doesn't say it has to be subordinate in size, which I find interesting. So
Area would be vague too.
yes, yeah,
Well, kind of like a farmhouse and a barn.
yes,
farmhouse is the primary living
Exactly.
structure. But the barn is, you know,
Subordinate purpose.
yes,
You could argue.
yeah.
So I'm free to build my barn on my property. Is that what you're saying?
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Okay, there's no other further discussion on this. I think these are all interesting points.
I think one of the things that it's important to the commission, again, looking at, you know, I think it's important, and this is more for the petitioner. You know, because the way the site plan review process is set up, and even the community design standards, you know, a two-dimensional plan is not going to give you
Perspective.
a corrective of what's its impact to its surroundings, not just the neighboring property, but what is that really gonna look at? And I'm not looking at it has to be a model or something, but I think it does require, you know, it reminds me, we had this house on Forsythia where the owners wanted to put a really nice contemporary house, like right in the middle of this long yard. And they just had beautiful views all around them, but it was the backyards of everybody else. And the house was going to be in there. And while it met the code numbers, you know, it just wasn't in the city's best interest or the neighborhoods to have, you know, a consistent row of houses up along the street and then one way in the back. And it came back to a compromise of pushing that house forward, letting them have a larger backyard, but also letting them extend into that. But you know, it really required some visual details to get that understanding in there. And that goes on both sides, not just, you know, anybody that's looking, that is concerned about it, but also, you know, it would be beneficial to see what is that three-dimensional impact around its surroundings.
Absolutely. The renderings really help, you know, give an idea of what everyone's,
And
you know, thoughts are, you know,
And that's
It
the
also-
purpose of the cross sections. We haven't seen those yet in there, but looking at it from the street and all that, getting that idea that the owner's been talking about, that the grades fall as you go into the process, because that could give a different perspective as if the grades were going up
Correct.
in there. But then just as importantly as it is east to west, what is it north to south? You know, and how is that, you know, you're now talking about, you know, the site is compact and it does permit 5-foot setbacks. But should that wall be a complete 2-level wall, or should it be broken up in there? And should you be working within the roof or have something to kind of just break that mass in there so it doesn't look, so it steps as opposed to being
Right.
dominant?
Right. Makes sense. Well, and I'll just kind of talk to the petitioner. It'd be great to be thinking about some type of renderings, you know, things like that, especially if the neighbors are gonna do their own renderings off of those, just so we can make sure we get clarity as to what's being proposed.
I would just caution, I don't mind producing renderings, but it's not a cheap process. So just to think about that in terms of.
If you can come up to the microphone.
Yeah, I would just, I have no problem producing renderings. I know how to do that myself, but it is not a cheap process. So that may be putting a burden on future residents who may not have the means to do it.
Totally get it.
It
I
is-
Totally understand.
Yeah.
But, you know, says something a little bit more unique, you know, than just a one-story shed.
Mhm.
You know, so. But point well taken.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point in time, since there's no further discussion right now, if people want to talk more, I'm all for it. But if not, I'd like to hear some general comments. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this. Really? I'm, okay. Let's see if online, do we have anybody that would like to speak on this?
Mr. Eccles, again, if you have any comments on regards to this discussion item.
And I see. All right.
And then there is an iPhone, is that?
Just to make this really brief, Susan Colhagen, 27 Forsythia, because it's going to roll into the next thing we're talking about is, we talked about last time that, you know, what is your definition of what you're going to need an arborist for? You know, because if something's like a pool, a garage, that could be a lot of tree loss. So,
Absolutely.
whatever we do with the tree preservation, are we going to be like moving it into this particular item as well? You know, anytime you look at a big structure.
Nice blending of topics.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So seeing nobody online raising their hands, right?
No, sir.
So, then I guess, good discussion. I wish we had more. Think about it, everybody, you know, because these are important items. Carlos, where are you gonna go with this next?
I think for the commission's purposes, we'll have a more extensive table and list of those communities. We'll also take a look at those along I-40 or I-64 and get some information on those. If there's anything specific or in addition, I think the commission had asked to pull like some previous examples that have been approved
Yeah,
in here. We are looking into that.
I'd also be curious if there's any other communities that have anything on ADUs,
Okay.
you know, as well.
University City.
Really?
About why, how it's not related to, I'm sorry, it's not related to, the short-term rentals. It's a completely separate subject and it lays out where
Really?
it's supposed to be. Mhm.
What about short-term rentals? Do we have anything or do any? other-
Nothing specifically within our regulations that call them out. And it's been something that the commission's been talking about of putting together
Yeah,
some standards
so it might be kind of nice.
to integrate.
I know we're stacking a lot
No,
of stuff.
but
on
that is
it,
part of it,
but-
and I think in our through both the comprehensive plan and all that, those are items that we're
Yeah.
looking into.
And I think we were talking too, you know, past of creating, you know, maybe some design guidelines for accessory structures.
There is, we did add, you understand in there, so we added a design guideline into chapter 425 specifically for accessory structures, talks about in there, but that they also are expected to comply with the other principles in there about mass material roofings, doors,
Right.
things like that.
Right.
Okay.
But we might need to add more to that
Okay.
based on these types of accessory structures,
No problem.
especially when they become more than 2 stories. So. Okay, good. All right, so let's, Carlos, I'm gonna just let you take over the agenda because I don't know where we are.
Next item, I think several people here are regarding the tree
Yes.
in there, and this is just a discussion item of where we're at. I am asking the commission to act on 2 components of it in there, but we can go over those later and but talk about what is going to be in the what we call the tree protection, preservation, and replacement plan.
Good.
In there, because the other codes that the commission will be talking about later will give staff a little bit more time for the review process and also define some of the criteria that needs to be submitted. One is being the arborist report in there. This is would be the next component, but they're not acting on this yet. And what you have before you is it wasn't attached to your packets, was our adopting a new section within our zoning code that addresses tree protection, preservation, and replacement. That would be the title. Those regulations would apply to new homes, significant improvements, anything over 1,200 square feet in there, and demolitions, because demolitions don't come before the commission. Right now, those are done administratively, and for the past, I don't believe arborist reports have ever been requested unless they were part of the, they came to the commission for the new home before they did the demo, which does not, probably only happens 20% of the time in there. There have been some in which, especially more recently, that we've asked the demolition contractor and owner to submit an arborist report in there, given that we were hearing more concerns about some of the tree protection and significance in there. This would also limit removal of what we would term significant trees. Now, I threw that number out and highlighted it in our last written draft to the commission of 20 inches or more in there, that we really do not want those, you know, touched or removed. And there is more context. This is just the highlights. And the other thing was, again, this was highlighted again there, that 30% of the existing tree canopy outside of the buildable area be maintained. Again, we're not looking at the buildable area of the lot, but we're trying to maintain a canopy around the outside perimeter where no more than 30% would be removed. And we still have to figure out the logistics of how that is going to be defined under what year and things of those natures. And I think those can be done through some administrative procedurals requirements. And then we would establish tree protection measures, including the submission of a tree protection plan and protection requirements. And then in that tree protection plan has to be prepared by an arborist that's certified with the state of Missouri. And then the part that we're still working on, and again, I'm looking at what are my resources and the skill levels of our inspectors under what I have right now, is, you know, establishing replacement standards, including the submission of a landscape plan, the minimum standards for those replacements that should be incorporated in that landscape plan. We've heard over to have a preferred species of trees. Again, the goal here would be to try to keep that minimal where the inspectors understand and we can get a good handle on those. But and again, this is where it always gets us in trouble, but also allow for the consideration of other species, but then we may come back to the commission to get some guidance and some help on those. So the goal here is not to restrict that you can only do these type of trees and that's it, but that if somebody has other thoughts or some creativity, they can come to the commission and have that discussion in there. It's not a means to regulate and stop. It's a means to allow opportunities for, you know.
We're not tree arbor, you know, we're not experts in trees either. So
Correct.
if they come to us with some different species and we don't know what it is.
We would do some research on your behalf and all that. Instead of Carlos approving it, it would be the commission. approving it.
Understood.
So
Understood.
Why are we not having a similar set of requirements for commercial structures and trees relating to those
those
structures?
exist under chapter 428 and all that. So this is solely to apply to residential. And
But
then-
is it
and
the
then
structure of that similar to this?
To some extent, yes. And we can go back because chapter 428 was probably 2009 plus or minus, and it probably does need to be updated. Plus, we have some new recommendations that were in a traffic, olive corridor
Mhm.
plan that was looking at more native plant use that we need to incorporate. So we'll come back, yes, in the second request on that. The planting conditions, meaning when it's best to get those in place and then how we would handle any escrows if it wasn't completed at the time occupancy was requested. So that's in a nutshell. You have in there, we hope that then, if there are any comments, the commission, please forward those to me, and then we can have a more formal draft that we can post at the next meeting and all that.
I was just a unit of measure for 20 inches diameter, circumference, radius, just
Yes.
height.
Understand.
Not-
And
But you know, like, so you put it, someone's gonna use it against you.
in your draft, it gets to that specific.
Okay,
I
great.
just,
Nope, just make.
I believe in limiting.
No,
Correct, but you are correct, and it talks about that is measured at breast height in there, and it is the circumference.
Okay.
I am curious about that 20 inches or more, you know, because those are the older, more mature trees. And just like there's a life cycle of a tree. You definitely want to keep the tree when it's got 10, 20 more years, you know, of life and everything. But if you have a large tree, it's that's starting to, show its age or going, deteriorating. Maintaining that or keeping that might not be the best thing. I don't know the answer to it.
Right.
I just know that in my experience, we bought a home, had two extremely large trees and we loved it. We loved it. But within 10 years, they both died. And one fell over. Luckily, it missed the house, missed the cars, and everything. And it was very expensive to take, to take them down or to get rid of it, And we even had bigger issues because we had a beehive in one. And then we didn't want to just kill the bees, so we had to bring a beekeeper out to get the bees out before we did it. And I mean, it was phenomenal process, and it was like Nature Channel in our front yard. But it was really neat. But like I said, when trees start, getting at their, past their prime and they're close to the house, I don't know how we talk about it. Or if there's a way to age a tree to kind of figure out what its lifespan is. But maybe some of the really big trees may need to come down, I don't know the answer.
Well, we anticipate in the arborist reports we received, that they will identify, the width of the tree, the circumference of the tree and then the health. We can ask if they can, and I'm sure that there is a way or means to identify what is a reason, what is an age and what, maybe, the intent of identifying the health is to give us an idea. Again, this is not here to say you shall not remove trees. It's to limit them. And the goal here is that there is that opportunity for analysis in there. We're not going to save them all.
Yeah.
And all that, but there should be the
Special
means for
attention.
reasoning. And then as you get further through this, when you get into the replacement, that there's a standard or an expectation because of that. Another thing we can take a look at is maybe we could look at, looking at it, that we want to look at it within a frame of reference between, and I'm just going to throw out numbers, between 12 and 18 and limit those as much as possible. Really give us a good assessment of those that are greater than 18 in there, because there may be reasons that we would prefer that they get removed, whether they're going to be touched or not, in there on behalf of for future residents and in there. And it's not that then that they get a carte blanche, but then there are conditions of how they have to be replaced.
Exactly. Yeah. Very good. Any other discussions, questions, or comments with Carlos?
You want us to send you our comments?
Yes,
What I heard.
well, or if there's some.
Yeah.
Some things but if you have something you want to talk about now.
Me personally, I could tell you, I don't like the canopy part of it, the 30%, because I think it's very ambiguous. And it's very ambiguous for the contractor that's trying to figure out on site what to take down. I'd much rather say, hey, this is the arborist report. If you're within outside of this building footprint, you can't take it down unless you get an arborist report to say, hey, this tree's this big. You can take this thing down, it's dying anyway. If it's outside this certain amount of your buildable footprint or utility line that's coming into that building. And then the tree protection, same thing, is we just need to make sure that the contractor can actually work on that site. I don't know if you guys saw, if you go down on Olive on the Monsanto site, you can see a tree protection around that thing. I mean, that thing's huge. That would take up literally the whole entire site. Nobody would be able to work in that site. So we just gotta be reasonable with what, make sure that we can work and do what we gotta do when you're on site.
I haven't noticed that one, but I will look at it.
Yeah, just look down. You can see it on the left there and you can see a big orange fence around it.
Yeah.
That's the tree protection that
Yeah.
we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
It's a good example because truthfully, it really needs to go around the drip edge.
Right.
But the drip edge on some of these trees
It's huge.
is humongous. I mean, It'd take up to half the site, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Interesting. All right, since there's seeing no further discussion, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak? Go ahead.
First, I agree with Brian that
State your name
Oh.
and address again.
Stephanie Todd, 7 Heather Hill Lane. There's a lot of things in the ordinance that need precision, like 20 inches. I say that's 20 inches height, so.
Yeah.
So, but, so one thing to add about with this preferred species, I would ask if you could say that all trees should be native. And then that's pretty easy.
Native to Missouri.
Yeah, yeah. All native to Missouri, only native trees to Missouri. You don't get these Bradford pears and these things that don't belong. And that's a huge thing. You got little things like redbud and oaks, and so the native, you have plenty to pick from. The canopy, you need a definition section, like how do you define canopy? How are you gonna measure it? How do you measure tree diameter? I didn't see it in there. And caliper is an instrument. Caliber is not a dimension because it calls in their caliper. Um, um, I would reduce that 20 inches, whatever, unless it's height. If you mean diameter, I would make it even smaller. 20 inches is you got a good size. I mean, the tree's been there a while. Because we have trees that, like are 2 and 3 inches in diameter that are still 14 foot tall. And, they cost $800 to plant. So I would I would reduce that to maybe 10 inches or something and try to keep those, because you're complaining that you don't want old trees. And I don't know what old trees are. I mean, white oaks live over 100 years.
But a Bradford pear won't last that long.
Right. But that's not native either.
Great. But
But
that's what I'm talking about is the lifespan, because the
Right.
trees, age varies depending on.
And you should, you need to put some, I'm trying to think of the word, something that you can enforce it, something enforceable in here. So if they plant a tree, if, you require them to plant a tree, you need to go back. It still has to be growing a year later. Otherwise you have to replace it again or something. They can't just stick stuff in and, in the middle of July when it's boiling hot and they don't do it right and say, well, we did it.
Other cities do require bonding and escrow requirements for like 2 years
Yeah.
after planting to
Right.
make sure that they are replaced.
Yes.
And I think that would be a fairly easy provision. I mean, it's administratively pain, but it's something that is the way you enforce it.
Right.
That would be the easiest
That would be
way.
good.
I've also
Yes.
seen where they just delay the installation of those trees or landscaping until you're out of the peak summer.
Right. Yeah. Usually you want to plant trees, early spring or
Fall.
late fall.
Yeah.
The protection zone, what that is so that the big trucks and things don't park or drive next to the trees and compact the soil, because then you compact that soil so much that no water gets down and the trees die. So that's why you need a fairly big protection zone around the trees, because if you've got all that equipment, they're going to it won't die today, but it'll kill the tree in a few years.
Okay.
So, and you noted that you need guidelines for how to replace them. So yeah, that's all missing. One big thing that I really would remove is you mention about root pruning. No, you do not want to do that. And I got a little suspicious when I think, oh, am I?
Yeah, you're up. But if you want to complete that thought real
But,
quick.
but
Continue if you don't mind that.
Yeah.
Bringing some good stuff.
That's what I said.
Yeah, because root pruning
I thought you were.
is.
No, I just
useful.
wanted to tell her.
But I think to save some time, I think you're reading something again that's a draft that was a cut and paste of other communities that wasn't intended to be critiqued.
Well, but what
That's-
I wanted to bring up was that the last time I was here, the comment was made that every developer uses the exact same landscaper, and it's that landscaper or arborist that has root pruning in their whatever, in their
List
in-
of services.
list of services. So that really throws up a big flag. If they do that routinely, that's just wrong to go cut the roots. That, I mean, that's why you put protection areas so the roots don't get impacted, and they're cutting off the roots. And then what it does too, I mean, okay, so the tree won't die today, but you know, and you've cut the roots. So now you've cut the stability of it. So when we had that last big, storm and all these trees blow over, well, that's what you're doing too. So I would, any arborist that says that's a service they do, boy, that throws up a ton of red flags to me.
Okay, great. Thanks for your comments. Appreciate it. Go ahead.
Jim Person, 9345 Llewellyn. Just a couple of quick comments. One, where this kicks in, I see the new home and I see demolitions, but then when you talk about significant improvements, when we were looking at that project earlier, if they do phase one, but they don't need to do it, where does it kick in? That's kind of the thing, because I've noticed on that particular, on 820, that it was, there's trees in back, but are they gonna stay? And do you have to do it at each phase, or where does the significant improvement come in? And then the second thing is, since 428 was brought up, I think it's important as you're looking at it to look at the long term, because we tend to look at just construction, but then there's life cycle, particularly on the commercial side. And we don't really get into that very often. I mean, 428 doesn't really even deal with that.
Right,
So
right.
that's all.
Good comments. All right, thank you.
Have we decided against having a master tree list that would make it easier for staff to just review, a landscape plan, and as long as the trees that are proposed are on our list, then we're done.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where we're heading.
I didn't get the impression that we were gonna create our own list of acceptable trees.
Isn't there a
It said it
preferred-
at the end, they would come with a list, but I think as Carlos called out, if someone wants to come with a exception, we would come forward too at that point.
Okay, I didn't see that there was a list of trees on.
I don't think we have the list yet, but that's kind of the end game. Or a general description such as native to Missouri, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's too vague. I mean,
Okay, well, let's get back to the comments. Please state your name and
Hi,
address for the record.
Gerald Axelbaum. I live at 5 Green Oaks Drive. And I haven't been in any of the other meetings, so I may say things that have already been dealt with or that my colleagues have already mentioned, but I wanted to emphasize the list of trees. I think simply native to Missouri does it. There's much variety. Environmentally, we want native trees so we can deal with water use, reduce water use. You don't have to worry about watering them as much. And longevity for here and the variety, there's so much variety. So I think if you say native trees to Missouri, people have plenty of variety and we can ensure there's longevity to them.
I got a question on that.
Sure.
Is there any ambiguity with that's native to Missouri? I mean, is there some books that might say, well, it is native according to this book, but not another, are we opening ourselves up?
I think you could probably use Missouri Botanical Gardens as the list, as a source of whether it's native or not. I
Yeah.
think they're considered the authority worldwide for species. So
Good.
Googling Missouri Botanical Gardens to check a tree and what its characteristics are will tell you whether it's native or not.
Perfect.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
I think others may think other things, but I think that's what I would rely on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Circumference versus diameter, I think that has to be specified, which was mentioned. I think that other cities, Webster and Kirkwood, use a circumference of a tree to measure it and determine and have criteria based on that. And I think, Carlos, you mentioned the height at which you measure would be chest height or something. So I don't know whether that's specified in terms of number of feet off the ground, but clearly a trunk is not uniform. So if somebody measures down to the base of the ground, they'll get a wide trunk, or they can measure it higher up in a narrower trunk. So I think we want to specify that height that it's measured at. But also,
You mentioned the difference between circumference and diameter. You're talking about just in case it's not completely circular.
the circumference is the measurement around
Around
the
it.
tree.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
diameter is measurement across the center of the
Okay.
tree. So
Okay.
very different. Circumference is over three times the diameter.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you measure just from our base.
I
of
get it.
that.
I get it.
So, it's deceptive, but circumference is much larger. And I don't know whether I think that that's what those, cities use. I could check into it and come back to you about that.
That'd be great. Or email Carlos,
Okay,
that way
yeah.
would be great.
And that comes to another point with, in terms of lifespan was mentioned. I think you mentioned that older tree has a certain lifespan, maybe should be allowed to take it down at some point. Or the right of way. I think Tim mentioned issues of, you gotta have access to the site. But I think the trick is to make sure that trees are replaced that are taken out. So you may have to take down an older tree, but I don't think that should give you the right to eliminate it and not replace it. And I think those two cities, as an example, use circumference, saying, if you've got trees of 100 inches circumference or 200 inches of circumference, whether it's 2 trees or 6 trees, you need to replace that with an equivalent amount of circumference. You may have to replace with 10 trees of 10-inch circumference.
That seems pretty, like that'd be a lot.
Well, smaller trees, younger trees will be less expensive, so you're not replacing a 100-year-old tree with a 100-year-old tree or an 80-year-old tree, but.
No, but just finding the location on a lot,
That many
sometimes
trees.
for that many trees.
Oh,
can't be-
well, you can
can't
get
be a
larger
challenge.
trees. I think that that's what they use for trees that are taken down or want to
Yeah.
be taken down,
Yeah,
that
I
they
get
have
it.
to replace the circumference equivalent. I can look into that further
Yeah,
and get
yeah,
back to Carlos.
That'd be great.
Glad
That'd be
to.
great. Thank you.
And my last point was the escrow provision. I think that's a great thing that, Petrie, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. I think that'd be excellent to have a guarantee of replacement and durability.
Great.
So that's all.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for even considering it.
Absolutely. Brian, did you have a
Well,
comment?
Carlos, at one point we had talked about the idea of also, I agree, like the challenge is even if we want people to plant this much, it may not, you can't plant too many trees next to each other. That's not healthy
Right.
for the trees too. So even if we say native, even if we say this, they might not have enough land to do it with whatever they're building. We had talked about options of could the escrow apply to the park, to the city to put tree, or maybe not to plant another tree, but to maintain trees, because we have to maintain trees in the parks. Because we have to prune them. We have to,
Deadwood.
whatever deadwood, we have to take care of them. We have to put, nutrients. So I don't know if that was something we're still considering as well.
I brought it up to department heads and about their thoughts. There was quite a bit of comments and questions. But I think we got
What?
representatives from the Parks Committee that's a good discussion that commission can have if they would entertain, as this commission is putting together, that they may get a different response.
Yeah, I would like to consider the idea that there will be situations where someone wants to meet all this, cannot meet any of the guidelines we've set up. So then what? Are we saying no, we're gonna deny a permit, or are we saying no, then what are give them the other options?
Correct. I understand. All right.
Good.
And if I could just add something here, first off, I truly apologize for mishearing what you said. I want you all to remember, somebody just brought up the fact of the city taking responsibility of trees. And you need to think about, as you all talk about, do we have manpower to enforce this? Do we have this? Do we have that? You gotta take into consideration what the city can do. And we're not able to sit there and take care of all the trees that are, within our area and purview of our city properties. So, as I head out the door, I want you to be mindful of the fact that what may sound good of, if you can't do it here, give it to the city. I would ask you to just think about that a little bit. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. Please.
I'm Barbara Scott, 1201 Warson Pines Drive. I don't have much to add, and I certainly have nothing technical to add, but I do love cities and towns that have a canopy, that have trees. You know, you look at aesthetics of buildings and things all the time, I'm sure. So trees add to that. It's just a quality of life issue as far as I'm concerned. And I'm really saddened when I see new construction and big houses and there's not a tree anywhere to be found. And the lot was filled with trees previously. I find that really very unappealing and I don't like it. So I would like to see more trees put in by new houses and even existing homes if there's any way to encourage people to do that.
I think we all share your point, which is why we're all talking.
Okay, very good. I appreciate you
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna go back. Doesn't like me, there we go. I want to go back to what Brian said about like giving it, I know we talked about like, you know, maybe planting them on like city property or setting up a fund and going with what Carlos said and what Mayor Waldman said. I think it would be very beneficial to meet with the Parks Department to look at that option. Just because some properties don't have enough space. But if they can't replace the tree on their property, there is areas along the greenway that trees would be beneficial. Or, you know, okay, so if we're looking at circumference of the tree and it would be $800, then that $800 gets put in a fund for those pruning or a tree removal that is on city property that would need maintenance. Not that we don't have the manpower to do all of it, but it would help with offsetting some of those costs maybe in the future.
Exactly.
That's not planted tree.
No.
But it's not, it's not, but
That's what I'm
then
saying.
when the city takes one down, then the city can make sure we put one in an area that would need one. But we have that money there for that removal originally.
And I think that's exactly my, it's not
Yes.
necessarily just keep planning, because that,
Right.
because the city then couldn't keep up with it. I
Right.
think it's a fund and this parks, and I agree, a conversation with parks is good, our city council, but I think ultimately it's at the fund, and then I think whether it's at the parks discretion or whoever can use it to plant more, to prune more, to pay for service, to invest, to maintain, to whatever the right thing is, it's at their discretion.
Oh, I'm sorry. She was up first. We're gonna go with. Okay.
Susan Colhagen, 27 Forsythia Lane. Yeah, great conversation. Basically, one other option too that some of the other cities were using was like some kind of point system where you could also put in native bushes. And a lot of bushes can go between trees and in places where you can't put a tree. And on top of that, if you use natives, you're going to probably need less pruning and care overall because they just work better in our environment. So
Good point.
that's all I have
Thank
to
you.
say. Thanks again.
Jim Person, 9345 Llewellyn. One thing, it may or may not work, but there is the Olivet Parks Foundation that is in place right now. And so that might be a vehicle to handle what Ragsdale was talking about.
Yeah, great. As well as Brian. I don't want to lose. Yeah. Any other people in the audience? Kate? Okay, I'll get to online. Yeah. Okay, we do have one online. Jeff.
Okay, Mr. Eccles, we're going to transfer you as a panelist, and you need to ensure that your microphone and video is on. Without that, we can't permit the. So the transfer is over, and there you are.
Great.
You should be all set, sir.
Great. Thank you for diligently calling on me for every item. The points that I wanted to make have already been discussed, so I won't go into great length about them. I will just support the opinions of allowing for alternative placement, however that might be. on those lots that may not either have the space to meet the requirements, or frankly have concerns about placement of trees close to properties that may inflict property damage at some point in time. We have personal experience with that. And then also wanted to comment on the tree list. Agree with the tree list. I know previously it was kind of limited, being in support of defining the native tree list versus having to then and expanding that list, and possibly consider, you already are requiring an arborist report as well as a landscaping report. Is there a process by which the arborist and the landscaper can help confirm that that's actually what's been done, rather than putting that burden back onto the city and the staff who may or may not be fully educated on the tree identification on whatever that list might be. So thank you. Appreciate the time for comment, as well as your service for the city for these important conversations and discussions.
Thank you. Good comments and great idea. Carlos, what do you think of that?
And there, it is something we can take a look into. It just gets a little bit complicated when you expand into a consultant or so for verification. There's a lot of places where we require as-built, so it's no different
Yeah,
than that. So
but it's
something we can take a
just
look at.
specifying it more with the trees,
Mhm.
and then it puts a lot of, we'll still have to do some checks on it and stuff, but it does make them, have to, just a little more follow-up, so
Yeah.
it puts a little bit more
It
onus
just
on them.
becomes more like a procedure on how we integrate it into the process.
Exactly,
And that's something
exactly.
we'd have to take a look into.
Good. Well, great discussion. Any more discussion with the members of the commission? I think we're all talked out. All right, Carlos, do you have anything else on this one?
No, sir.
Okay, I think we'll move on. So thank you, everybody. Great comments. Okay. Once again, I'm lost as to where we're at.
All right. So there were,
I should have called for reports.
there were a couple of agenda items. Let me go back to where am I here? Thought I had it up. All right. So we have two ordinances for the commission to consider. I'm going to do ordinance or item 4C, which is regarding the submittal requirements, which is related with the tree, as part of the tree phase-in in there, and then we can do the signage. I don't think there's anybody here specific for the signage. So
Yeah.
is that okay?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Mhm. We've had some discussions regarding this, and this is phasing in, trying to incorporate the new regulations and procedures for the preservation, protection, and replacement of trees on that. And one of the things we need is more time. And it's not necessarily to give us more time to do a specific review, but to kind of change our process to be a little bit more thorough, to make a determination on whether things are complete or not, as opposed to trying to work within the timeline frame. So this ordinance that's before you tonight would amend section 425, which is our community design regulations, applicable to all, both commercial and residential. It will change the submittal requirements, which would incorporate the requirement of submitting of an arborist report along with a landscape plan, and then also change the review procedure, that instead of the staff reviewer having up to 10 days, we're adding more things to the plate here. And the pie is not getting, the pieces aren't getting smaller, pie is getting bigger. So we're asking that we have up to 15 days to determine if there are any deficiencies. And once those have been addressed, 30 days to place the item on the agenda. What would happen in here is hopefully we would avoid something like, what we did for 820. That it would have been a little bit easier to just say you can't because you don't have your contours, your cross sections, and all that. In their case, they were trying to work with us, at least in terms of getting, like, we need to know more type of thing. This would kind of prohibit us from trying to do that. And I think we'll still find a balance where we can assist and get some, some input from the commission. But that's what the intent is. We've increased, some of the we've realigned a lot of the priorities that the commission wants us to take a look at. Stormwater was a big one for a good time. I think we got a good handle of that. We have outside help for those now. That now kind of shifting into the trees seems to be, getting up on that list in there. This will give us more time to do that.
Yeah, especially anything new. It's gonna take a lot longer in the beginning.
So that's a nutshell of what these changes are. And again, it also changes some of the things that we were requesting, and that being an arborist report and a landscape plan.
Are you looking for us to make a motion to?
I would ask if the commission would consider, if they're comfortable to approve a motion for the council to adopt the changes.
I don't see any issues with it, but I'm curious if anyone's had a chance to look at it or review it. No issues. Okay. So, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead, Laura.
A motion to approve a petition for an ordinance to amend section 425.040 submittal requirements and section 425.050 review procedure of single-family residential structures of Article 1 Community Design Regulations being part of Chapter 425 Community Design General of Title 4 Land Use of the Municipal Code as presented in the memorandum from the Department of Planning and Community Development dated February 6th,
Thank you.
2025, subject to any staff conditions noted therein.
Yeah, she was way ahead. Yeah. Motion's been made by Laura Ragsdale. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Ooh, it's gonna be tough. I'm going with Sam on the. Carlos, you please call the vote.
Absolutely. Commissioner Ragsdale,
Approved.
Commissioner Powell,
Approve.
Commissioner Wallach. Approved. Commissioner Lewis,
Approved.
Commissioner Dragell.
Approved.
And the motion passes unanimously 5-0. And I'll also note, I should have noted it, Mr. Spiegelglass had indicated he had to leave at around a little after 8:30, that he's no longer in attendance in the meeting.
Yeah.
The minutes reflect that.
Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, so reports next, right?
One more item, sir.
Oh.
Nice try.
This, and these hopefully we talked them out, but this is regarding the sign code change
Yeah.
to the light industrial districts to allow a second monument sign for properties that have a good length in terms of their in there. We just saw another property that probably benefit from this that has multi-tenants. And as we see in our industrial park slowly convert to more multi-tenants, I think this gives us a little bit more flexibility. And so we're asking the commission again, you guys did take a look at this in January. And also we talked about it in our December meeting. So if you had over 200 feet, you could place another monument sign. But there were some requirements that they either had to be at the far ends or extended far enough from each other. So they couldn't be like
Right next.
right to each other.
I think that's
Yep.
good.
If the commission has any questions, be glad to answer them. If not, you have a suggested motion.
Any further discussion? Go ahead, Laura.
I drove by the Carrollton Bank
Mhm.
location of where it is and just, I mean, I used to live over there, but used to cut through there all the time, but I drove by there and like it makes perfect sense of having two signs because to me at least, because the way you're coming in, they need a sign at the one side versus you wouldn't know it. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
To this.
Glad you drove by. That's good. Okay, any other further discussion or do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay. A motion to approve a petition for an ordinance to amend Article 8 permitted signs in industrial LID zoning district of Chapter 415 regulations being part of Title 4 land use of the Olivet Municipal Code as presented in the memorandum from the Department of Planning and Community Development dated February 6, 2025, subject to any staff conditions noted therein.
Motion's been made by Laura Ragsdale. Do I hear a second?
Second.
And seconded by Brian Lewis. Nice. Carlos, you please call the vote.
Commissioner Ragsdale,
Approved.
Commissioner Powell,
Approve.
Commissioner Wallach,
Approved.
Commissioner Lewis,
Approved.
and Commissioner Dragell.
Approved.
All right. Chairman, I greatly appreciate you guys taking action on those ordinance items. It's been a long time coming. And then, of course, we'll wrap up the tree stuff hopefully within the next couple of
Great,
weeks.
great.
And then one last motion I would ask is being recorded is that for every typos Jack had, that we deduct 1 hour, or he does 1 hour of additional work.
Yes.
Because we're up to a full day by now.
I think we make him like stack the chairs and then put him back again, you know? Yeah.
So to expedite, Chairman, we have no meeting minutes for the commission tonight. We'll get those at your next meeting. Our next meeting, of course, is on February 20th, and we have a couple of action petitions for the commission to consider, and hopefully we'll have more discussion on the assessment structure with the information we'll research. You have a scheduled calendar, items and events there. I'm not going to go over them, but just so you're aware. But a couple of notes that important for the commission. Sad note that we did receive a letter of resignation from Mr. Rosenberg. So Daniel's no longer on the commission due to some work-related items and things. So it's sad to see. Daniel served as our architectural designer expert in there, and the way the code is written up is that 4 members of the commission have to represent specific expertise. So the council will be putting that out in their soliciting residents interested, but we are really looking for somebody that has an architectural or landscape architect background, and you won't believe that's probably the hardest position to fill. And then I've heard from other communities that they had the same problem. So I don't know where architects are living, but they have to be. So we do know of about 3 or 4 that we'll get into contact and urge them to submit. But if anybody knows or has a neighbor or so that has an architecture or landscape architecture background, urge them to apply or send their name to me, and we'll give them a call.
Great.
And it'll probably be at least a couple of meetings, and maybe sometime March or April before that position gets appointed, being that they have to be interviewed with the council and getting all that coordination completed. I'll let the mayor talk about some other aspects of this, but then I'm going to go into a couple of little exciting things because I think it's worth noting. Big day today. It was phenomenal at Aldi.
Wow.
If you get a chance, it is top notch. You will be fully impressed with the facilities there. It was neat to stand there and just see all these. I mean, we see a lot of faces come in and out, but when you get caught outside and they're like, "Hey, remember me?" and all that, you're trying to remember names and all that. But it was neat. A lot of happy residents, a lot of people that walked there. It was neat to see the activity, and some of it was because it was a lot of overflowing parking in there. But the interior is great. The exterior is great. You guys did a top-notch job pushing them to their limits and doing it. And I think they were excited with their product too. And there,
That striping looks great too. Yeah.
on the upper right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks computer generated.
Yeah, but it was before they wanted to have a lot more striping. Yeah, going out into the parking or the street area.
On the upper right-hand corner, that is the Irvington Place Apartments. They're already working in framing on the 2nd level, so that's moving right along. Behind that, you would see the Chevys and the CVS. And then to the right would have been the Public Works building. So I'm on Alice Place looking southward, taking that picture as they were working today. And then on the lower right is, this is about a month old, the interior to Great Heart Brewery, which is the interior was very impressive. Now that they got the furniture in there, it's even more impressive in there. They should be opening on February 14th on Valentine's Day. And there, so we're looking forward and welcoming them then also along with Audi to our community in there. Last thing on our end, Don has been pushing out. We need people to vote on their favorite restaurants and businesses. And there, I know we've gotten a lot, but I know that if each one of you voted, there would have been 42 votes in that process. And if you guys are saying you all voted and the other commission is saying they all voted, and that the department's heads have all voted, something's wrong, and I would. So I urge you to take the
Point
time.
well taken.
Take the time. You don't have to put, you could put your favorite, or you could put your two favorite, or you could put your three favorite in there, but it is important.
Total top 3 businesses, top 3 restaurants.
Correct.
All right.
All right.
When's it due?
By pushing, I'm going to push, March 24th.
Oh, so we
the
got
last day.
end of the month.
I know. We're strict.
The other,
Hold on, I got a question. Do you look at the votes as they come in?
Yeah. Up, I
Look at who's sending them in.
I'll,
too.
no, that I disabled on the back end.
Okay.
one more thing in there, sorry, Mayor. March 20th is the week of Ladue School District spring break. I do need to get a head count in there.
Yeah, I won't be here.
I probably will be here.
I'm in town.
1, 2, 3. I would not have a quorum, and there's no problem with that. I just want to give advance notice to people coming in. But right now, if I have 3 confirmed members with 1 vacancy, I don't have a quorum, and I just want to be able to give the applicants as far advance notice, and we'll try to shift things closer
Yeah.
to the first meeting if we can. So,
Because we're getting practice at these long meetings.
pardon.
Sorry.
So we'll go ahead and, that being said, I mean, it's a break even and I need 4, and I'm not trying to persuade anybody in there. But I would like, it behooves us to give us people as much advance notice as possible. So we're gonna go ahead and post it as canceled. Okay, all right. And then fellow planners, 2 events, the mayor will talk about somebody that's going to speak at the council meeting next Tuesday. I'll leave that to her, but at the meeting, at the Coffee of the Mayor, March 12th, in honor of our mayor and her retirement, I reached out to the planners in Creve Coeur, U City, and then the Missouri Department of Transportation planner, who's also a planner, to come to talk with the mayor about our visions for the Olive Boulevard corridor. Creve Coeur has their own, U City has their own, we've had our own, and then MoDOT, they've been striving to try to improve to get out of just that engineering aspect of it. And I think it'll be a good discussion. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to have somebody from Creve Coeur, but we're still trying to push on that. So I think it'll be a pretty neat discussion.
Great, very interesting.
And then Don, if you had anything else.
I just wanted to apologize that the coffee with the mayor on February 12th is with county council member, or new county council member Gretchen Banger. And the planners meeting with our coffee with the mayor is March 12th. It's mislabeled here, not that you guys would figure that out, but if you can come, as Carlos was saying, it will be a great, just to get all of the communities together and talk about the shared goal.
I think it's a great idea. Very excited for it.
Yeah.
All right, Missy.
I thank you so much. Today was really exciting, guys. I mean, the lot was full, came home from work, the lot was full. I'm going to have my first experience of going in an Aldi's on Sunday. I have never been in an Aldi's.
Bring your quarter.
Bring your quarter. Yeah, and I got a little keychain, and someone had to show me today that keychain is to hold the quarter.
Yes.
You guys, you really kicked it. This is the top new urban design for Aldi's. They told us that this is the first one we're doing. People did comment about that. The first lady in line, when I got up there and I said, "So how long you been here?" 1:30 in the morning.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. It was cool. So I just kind of want to say, February 11th, I would encourage you all to come and sit into our council meeting. Mr. Sansone is supposed to be coming and having a conversation with us with regards to the lot that is connected to the Oliver. And, you know, if there's something that the city has to do in a collaboration to help with a design or something with regards to how things are accessed, you know, to encourage, you know, that would be great. And, you know, I don't know what is or what is not going to be offered, but you're important folks. And I think you need to be there to just hear it. I want to remind you, yes, you all know I'm going out the door, but you know, they came to EDC and they spoke about how quickly their apartments, you know, filled up, that they, you know, realized that this city, our city, is a great place to be investing in where people want to live, work and play. And I guess I'm just a little bit hard, folks, you know, with regards to what I expect from people who are the names of our area that do the things that they do, which is development. So, you know, please, if you can, attend in the audience or attend by Zoom and let's hear what they have to say. Um, my guest is going to be the Honorable Gretchen Banger, who is our newly elected St. Louis County council person. We're gonna have some interesting conversation. And in April, Carlos went over what the mayor's coffee is going to be in March, but in April, it is going to be the current city council. We're all going to sit together and we're going to discuss, you know, where we are, where the city is, what we're proud of, the accomplishments, and just overall, you know, here's where we are, and hopefully everybody's happy. I want to thank you all for everything that you do. This is a tough job, folks. You know, we can't please everybody all the time. So, great aspect of listening today, great aspect of interaction and conversation. And we will see you at the next meeting. Enjoy your time off on March 20th.
All right, thanks, Missy.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Anybody else have any questions or discussion items? Seeing none, we'll adjourn at 9:22. Thank you.